Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey there, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Slate caught my attention with the headline, The Cult of Kill Tony. Luke Winke writes under the headline, Tony Hinchcliffe's fame skyrocketed after he made a joke that spooked even Donald Trump. In Texas, I watched how he became the most powerful comic in America. Luke writes, doing well on the program can be genuinely life-changing. Cam Patterson, an affable storyteller with a thick Florida accent, was working on a golf course when he first passed through the mothership in 2023. He crushed his set 2 years and 500,000 Instagram followers later. Deadline reported that Cam is part of the upcoming Kevin Hart comedy 72 Hours. Meanwhile, Casey Rocket was living in his car when he moved to Austin after becoming a routine player on Kill Tony. He's now on a nationwide tour. On the other end of the spectrum, bombing on Kill Tony can leave a burgeoning comedy career in tatters. For every Patterson, there are scores more overmatched stand-ups who crack under the immense pressure of the moment. Punchlines are botched, pacing is muffed, flop sweat beads on foreheads, and those 60 seconds begin to feel like an eternity. Hinchcliffe smells blood in the water. The post-interview morphs into a brutal hazing. The subject then slinks back through the enveloping curtains at the rear of the stage, smarting from an uncoverable psychic wound broadcast for the whole world to see. Stephanie Robertson is a comedian who, on the Dose of Reality podcast, said, that was the worst moment of my life. We all bomb in comedy, but everybody has access to my bomb. I was like, my life is over. I've humiliated myself. The piece then walks through how Kill Tony works and the history of Kill Tony. I imagine if you listen to this podcast, you are familiar with most of that story. Mike Gleason, a 45-year-old comedian from Chicago, told Slate he moved to Austin with the specific intention of getting on Kill Tony. Gleason said, I needed to find my audience, and I feel like this is my audience. Every other aspect of comedy shoves out edgy voices. It's more mainstream. Everybody wants to get on TV. I had no interest in getting on The Tonight Show. I think Kill Tony is better than The Tonight Show. A good episode of Kill Tony is better than The Tonight Show. A bad episode of The Tonight Show is better than a bad episode of Kill Tony, if that makes sense. That's my opinion there, not the Slate piece. Brian Garr talked about the change in the Austin scene. It was night and day after COVID. You could immediately tell who was new. They were all young. They'd all moved here from Iowa or whatever. And they all had a trans joke, all of them. It was like a signifier for them. We could tell immediately who was here to get on Kill Tony. It's a bunch of kids in their 20s trying to impress a bunch of dudes in their 40s. Comedy establishment does not like that Kill Tony exists. All right, maybe I'll pick at that some more tomorrow. Sebastian Maniscalco, speaking with Billboard magazine, discussed whether or not he's a foodie. He apparently hates the word foodie. Sebastian said, I wouldn't say I'm one of those guys who's like, there's a 1969 Bordeaux that you got to have, or this wine has notes of cedar. I just know what I like when I drink. My wife and I got married in Napa, and I was introduced to wine about 15 years ago through my father-in-law, who's a big wine guy. When it comes to food, I like to cook. I'm not doing any gastronomy over here. I like to make steak. I like to make chicken. We do taco night for our kids, and I'm always trying to perfect the taco meat. My daughter, who's 8, I made burgers for her last night, and she said, Daddy, I like it, but it's got too much oil on it. I had put a little oil on the bun and then put them down on the grill to toast them a little bit. I over-oiled it, which I knew, and she picked it out. I was like, Jesus, 8 years old. At 8 years old, I didn't care what I was eating, but apparently my daughter is Bobby Flay. Sebastian, have you ever gone back to Sicily to see your father's origin? Sebastian said, I took my father about 12 years ago. My father and I always wanted to go back to his hometown. He never took us when we were kids, and then later in life I said, we got to make a trip. Then he goes down with quadruple bypass surgery. He comes out of that, and I go, listen, we're going to Sicily before you die. It's got to happen. So shortly after he had the surgery, me and him took a journey to Sicily, to the Amalfi Coast, and to Rome. I got to see where he grew up. It reignited his passion to go back to his hometown and reconnect with old friends. It's nice to see that he's fallen in love with where he came from because he was so worried about work. My father came to this country, and that's all it was, work. He had this whole mentality, if you left too long, people are going to forget him, which I have too, a little bit in comedy. Nowadays, you feel like you've constantly got to be out there touring or on Instagram. Then I talked to Chris Rock, and he's like, you can't make an entrance if you never leave the room. That's great advice, Chris Rock. I took that to heart. I think I've established a fan base where if I did take some time off and wasn't constantly out there, I'd keep him when I came back. So I'm trying to take Chris's advice. Josh Johnson, a lot of buzz on Josh. He spoke to the BBC about the Johnny Carson era and how things have changed in comedy. Josh said, now it's sort of direct-to-consumer as opposed to before, where you had the TV networks that worked as sort of the buyer. Back then, it was a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. That's why so few people could break through, and why breaking through to the masses was this instant success. But there's only a golden era of each thing. There's only so long that something gets you something before everyone's trying to do it, and then it doesn't do what it used to do. I look at trajectories and how to advance a career in the same way I look at stock tips. By the time I find out, it's too late. By the time someone can give you a template of everything to do to get where you want to go, that thing's probably outdated. I can't necessarily speak to what everyone's career was like in the Johnny Carson or Jay Leno era, but I imagine that audience is stuck with you because of the moment they got swept up in when you were being created. I think with the internet, the people that find you now are staying with you because of who you are. Josh continued, there is something to be said for old systems continuing to still be good for you. There's this idea that being on TV sort of isn't what it used to be, right? I think that's just because with the internet, people have more options, but that doesn't mean that these platforms that are either legacy names or have a very wide reach aren't incredibly influential to a person's career. I think there's this idea that independent creators and independent media will one day take over everything. I don't actually think that'll be what happens. I think independents will gain more market share in the future. But I also think that you cannot understate what people get out of traditional TV, traditional movies, traditional news, and everything. As much as we like to think they make bad decisions, I think we still like the idea that there's a big thing a person could do. Kevin James told DW he didn't think Ray Romano's sitcom was going to work. He said, I couldn't believe it. He's such a low-energy guy. Sitcom guys to me were like big, wacky characters. I'm like, this is death. It's not going to happen. The first few years of going with Ray, even when our shows came out, would go to CBS functions and things like that. Red carpet things were so rough because they knew him, but my show had just come out, so they're taking 1,000 pictures of Ray. I'm just kind of standing there. Nothing's clicking. When he would attempt to get closer to Ray Romano, the photographers would ask him, could you move over? He says it was tough. Kevin James said he learned everything from Ray Romano on how to do a sitcom. One tip was how to underplay a scene. Romano was so good on his sitcom, and the way he threw things away, I was like, wow, we have to watch him and learn from him because I'm going to be too big on camera. So even in The King of Queens, when I see episodes now, I'm like, throw it away, kid. What are you doing? I'm like, gee whiz, I wish I could go back and redo it. Steve Martin is heading to Chattanooga. He will be co-hosting the International Bluegrass Music Association's Bluegrass Music Awards. It's complicated. September 18th at Memorial Auditorium. Steve said, I'm thrilled to be hosting with Allison Brown and connecting with all my bluegrass friends, as opposed to my kind of dumb comedy friends. And now, for something completely different, the Britain Royal Mail has issued stamps celebrating Monty Python. 10 stamps celebrating things like Nudge Nudge, know what I mean, and the Lumberjack song. Other stamps include the Spanish Inquisition. I didn't expect that. The Ministry of Silly Walks, Dead Parrot, and the Nude Organist. 4 more stamps honor the 50th anniversary of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, including one showing the Black Knight insisting it's but a scratch. Michael Palin said he was very glad to share a stamp with the Nude Organist. Boy, that's a lot of fun. Just for Laughs Sydney is coming back in November. 13th edition. Good to see the Just for Laughs people are rocking. This year's confirmed performers include Eddie Izzard, John Bishop, Ashley Gavin, Rob Beckett. You Yanks may have noticed Rob on Last One Laughing. Reggie Watts, Jarlath Regan, and a bunch of names that you may not recognize at this point. Now, I know you're listening every day going, Johnny Mac, stop talking about the Fringe. I'm not going to Scotland. You keep telling me where these shows are playing. Do you really expect me to go to Scotland and see these shows? Well, friend, listen to me. I'm here to tell you about Fringe at Home. Shortlist.com put together a list of the comedians, which I would be reading to you now, except my browser just froze as I started to scroll down the page. Now, why don't you edit this out, John? Because that's not fun. It's still not responding. Apparently, Shortlist.com does not get along with the Safari browser. Let me open up Chrome. If you're a new listener, we're a little more casual on the weekends around here. Ah, yes, on the Chrome responsive website. Some shows you could watch. Patrick Spicer's Pivotal. You'll find that on YouTube. Jeff Innocent's Smart Casual, also on YouTube. In his words, he became an overnight viral sensation after doing comedy for 27 years. Sarah Millican's show, Chatterbox, is on YouTube as well. Shortlist tells us she's a cornerstone of British comedy for a reason. If you want to dissect the world of fashion, exercise, cake, and relationships, this one is worth the watch. Vittorio Angeloni translations. Okay, he was one of Montreal's new faces. He was fantastic. Why don't you watch this? Dylan from the Facebook group, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. Feel encouraged to join the group. Dylan, are you listening, Dylan? You're going to watch Vittorio Angeloni's Translations full stand-up special on YouTube, okay? Because why am I calling out Dylan? Before I even have breakfast, Dylan has watched 3 comedy specials every single day. I don't know if he stays up later. I don't know if he gets up earlier. But like, Jim Jeffries drops a special on Netflix. Dylan's watched it by 6:30 a.m. Anyway, Victoria was really good at new faces. Shortlist tells us we could watch Joe Lycett's I'm About to Lose Control. Tom Houghton's The Honorable. You'll find that on Shortlist.com if you need the list. And now you don't have to go to Scotland and complain. Because they were always complaining about the Fringe. Here's a guy, Drew Cripps. He wrote on The Scotsman, I truly believe the Fringe used to be like a playground. I remember sitting in a circle listening to Bob Slayer, owner of Heroes of the Fringe, regale such allegories to me and fellow wide-eyed alternative comedies of the future. We listened to stories of comedians' mishaps and adventures at the Fringe, tales so wild I can't share them here in the print. Just take my word for it, the Fringe used to be more punk rock, more of a playground, more truly Fringe. Now, things have changed. I understand when a comedian sinks $8,000 just for the privilege of standing on stage, they need to justify that cost by transmuting it into some 3.5-star review from a student reviewer. The Fringe today isn't just about mucking it up with your mates. It's about awards, recognition, and careful social maneuvering. The introduction of awards only made it feel more competitive. But I'm not doing any of that. I've set things up so I can actually enjoy it. I'm very lucky to have met someone who can provide me with free accommodation. Last year, all my props got destroyed. I asked the venue if they had a bag for my props. They gave me a bin bag. I put everything inside it, stored it in the container. Unfortunately, the venue thought it was a garbage can with garbage in it, including coconut milk and half-eaten sandwiches, which ruined all my gear. So I had to improvise a new show, which people really enjoyed, and I sold out my half run, extending it to the full Fringe due to popular demand. This year, I'm going in with no props. I'm hoping one day the Fringe can return to that legendary playground it once was, a place where comics can be loose, have fun, and truly play. Until then, I'm doing my best to keep that spirit alive with a few other idiots. And that is your comedy news for today. If you'd like the program without commercial interruptions, if you're on Apple Podcasts, click the banner. It says uninterrupted listening. And then for $5 a month, and the first month is free, so why wouldn't you just try it? And then, day 32, you forget, and then you're like, he accidentally gave Johnny Mac $5. He got me, and he even told me he was going to get me with that trick. I know, it's mean. 30 days, free trial, and then, $5 a month. And I did the math here. 17 cents a day. I was texting with a friend of the show, Scott Beckett, about it. I was like, hey, Scott Beckett, 17 cents a day. And he was like, yeah, no. Hey, Scott Beckett, you like commercials? Here's 3 coming up now.